Welcome to 11s at my house. So we'll start with how not to make tea, which is why I never order tea in a restaurant in the United States, because what you get is a pot of hot water with a tea bag on the side. And I don't know what drink this is, but it is certainly not tea. I'm going to turn on my kettle because the secret to good tea is that the water has to boil, but we'll get to that later. Tea is the most popular beverage in the world, second only to water. Many different countries have many different tea traditions. Today is traditional English tea as it's made and drunk in the British Isles. Japanese green tea is a whole separate process. There's all other kinds, but we're doing English today. So the botanical name of tea is Camellia sinensis, which is the actual tea plant. What makes black tea different than green tea is it is dried and fermented, which is what makes it black instead of green. So let's talk about equipment. I have a really nice teapot I'm going to be using today that has the strainer in it. You can also make tea with a tea bag just in a cup. That works fine too. I have a fancy brass tea service that I just have for show. I'm actually going to be using that today. If I was doing really authentic tea, I would heat the pot first, which I'm not going to do today. And the other thing about teapots is my English relatives say you never wash it with soap. You just rinse it out with hot water, and the brown patina that accrues inside the teapot is what makes the tea taste good. When you pour out the tea, if you're making loose tea, they make fancy tea strainers. But if you don't have one, you can just use an ordinary kitchen sieve. My favorite kind of tea is Yorkshire Gold, which I have seen at Fresh Market. My standard daily drink is Tetley's British Blend, which is what I'm using today. And for loose tea, I have Scottish Breakfast that I got at last year's Stone Mountain Highland Games. So tea is determined, the strength of the tea is determined by how much tea you use and how long you steep it for. And the standard rule in a pot is 1 slightly heaping teaspoon per cup plus 1 for the pot. That's a little strong for me. This is a 4-cup teapot, so I'm just going to use 4 spoonfuls. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are my 4 spoonfuls. Tea should be stored in a airtight metal container. If you've got one, it helps it keep longer. This is my Tetley British Blend tea bag that's going in my mug. You can use a tea ball or a tea strainer, which I forgot to get out this morning. The thing I don't like about tea balls and tea strainers is when tea leaves get wet, they expand. And even if you only fill your tea ball half full, it doesn't give the tea leaves room to expand and have the water flow through properly. So it's just, if you don't have a teapot with a strainer in it, just put the tea loose in the pot, and then you can strain it as it comes out. Or the other thing you can do is just try to remember not to drink that last swig at the bottom of the cup, because the tea leaves will settle as you're drinking it. So the most important thing about tea is the water has to boil. You start with cold water out of the tap and you bring it to a full rolling boil. I'm using my electric tea kettle today. If you don't have one, you can put a pot on the stove and you just have to make sure that the bubbles, when it starts boiling, get all the way to the middle of the pot. My other tea story is my husband, Jim, who is my cameraman today. Thank you, Jim. Started proposing on our second date. And of course, I didn't take him seriously. But when he convinced me that he really did want to get married, I would not accept him until he demonstrated that he could make a proper cup of tea. And the most important thing about another way not to make tea is to put it in the microwave. Microwaves are great for heating up a cup of tea that has gone cold, but you cannot make it that way. Originally, the water doesn't, the chemical process by which the water comes to a boil is different, and the water just gets scummy and icky. And he brought me a cup of tea that he had made in the microwave, and I just waved my hand and said, "Take it away." So I'm very lucky that he was patient and long-suffering and waited for me to and learned the proper technique to make tea. You can see this, I don't know if you can see, there's steam coming out of my kettle. And it really is a full rolling boil. So I'm going to pour it into my pot here. And the other thing that drives me crazy is if you measure your water in your cup and then put the tea bag in the wet cup, the tea gets wet with cold water, and that's wrong. It has to be the boiling water striking the cup. So I've got my cup of tea and my teapot ready to go. 3-minute timer, please. Thank you. Yes, my husband is so on top of it, he's already set the 3-minute timer for us to go. Another story about tea is when my son was little. We opened the refrigerator and realized there wasn't very much tea left in the bottom of the bottle. And my son said, "It's okay, Mom."
Milk. Milk. You said tea.
Tea. Milk in the refrigerator. And my son said, "It's okay, Mom. I'll eat my cereal dry this morning. I know how grouchy you get when you don't have your tea." Which is true. I get very grouchy.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we can look at while we're waiting for the tea to brew, 3 to 5 minutes is normal. I tend to go 3. I also made scones today. My family is from Durham, which is the county north of Yorkshire, and we say scones. Scones and scones are correct pronunciations. You can say it either way. The Earl of Grantham on Downton Abbey says scones. And if you've never had scones fresh out of the oven, if you've only ever bought them at Starbucks, like out of a cold dairy case, and even if they reheat it, it's not the same. You have to have it fresh out of the oven. Is really a different experience. And if you do it correctly, they do puff up pretty well. It's basically the same ingredients as a traditional Southern biscuit, but the technique is different, and they come out to be very crumbly. There's a couple of controversies involving tea and scones. One is whether you put the milk in first or second. One theory is in the early days of fine china, the quality had a lot of variety, and if you didn't have properly made china and you put boiling tea in it, it would shatter. If you put the milk in first, it would cool down the tea enough to temper it that the cup wouldn't shatter. The controversy with scones has to do with Devon cream, or what's called clotted cream, which is halfway between cream and butter. It's like really thick cream, and it's what you have on your scones. Speaking of milk. So the controversy is in Cornwall, they put jam first, cream second. You slice your scone in half and you like it like a sandwich. They put the jam on the bottom and the cream on top. In Devon, they put the cream on the bottom and the jam on top. And it's very controversial which way you have it. I like cream on the bottom because it kind of acts like spackle. Scones can be really crumbly, and the cream sort of holds it all together and preserves the structural integrity of your scone while you're trying to eat it. How are we doing on time there? Sometimes give my loose tea a swish, but I typically do not stir my bag. The thing with bags is not to squeeze them out. If you squeeze your bag, it's where the bitterness is, and you don't want to do that. And my time is up here, so I'm going to take out my tea bag. I'm just going to fish it out with my spoon. Put it down. And a little bit of milk. And I also don't have a cup to put my other tea in, so let me get a cup.
We're very fond of this grandfather clock.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so because this has the sieve built into it, I don't need a tea strainer. I can just pour it out. And you can see it's a lovely dark brown color. And then it's also, there's a spectrum of how much milk people like in their tea. I'm sort of somewhere in the middle, not too light, not too dark. It's pretty strong because it's loose, so I want a little more milk. You see the color of the tea, there we go. So it's kind of medium brown. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, high tea. Americans like to say high tea because it sounds fancy, but it really isn't. If you've ever seen or read The Hobbit, when the dwarves come to Bilbo's house, that's high tea. It's the evening meal served. The food is savory. It's pork pie and sausage rolls and Scotch eggs and spice cake and a savory, hearty meal that you would get on a farm when the workers come in from the fields. What Americans really mean by high tea is afternoon tea or cream tea. That's finger sandwiches and scones and jam and cream. So in the days when the faculty auction comes back, I am looking forward to auctioning off a visit to my house to make scones. And upstairs, downstairs, we make scones in the kitchen and then come in and have proper tea after. So cheers. Any other questions? 1 teaspoon per cup. That's what I do. You put cold water in the pot and you pour it out and you see how many cups it is. Make it stronger or weaker, use more or less tea, depending on your own taste.
Green.
Green tea, I understand you do not bring the water to a boil. The water needs to be hot, but not boiling. And I was lucky enough, we had a Japanese foreign exchange student when I was about 4, and I just have dim memories of a Japanese, she did a Japanese tea service in our living room, and it was amazing. And I just remember her, there's a whisking process that happens with the tea. And the other thing about Japanese tea is Japanese teacups do not have handles. And she said that's because if it's too hot to hold in your hand, it's too hot to drink. So the point of having a handle where you're not touching the cup means you don't know how hot it is and you don't know whether you can drink it or not. So it's actually quite logical not to have handles on your teacups.